Welcome, everybody, to the Half Court Podcast. He's Joel, I'm Dirk, and what a week of local basketball in Nebraska. Wow. I feel like there's the ripple effects from Sunday at CHI Health Center are still rippling, Joel. We're going to get into both sides of this, Nebraska and Creighton. Nebraska's got a big one against Purdue tomorrow. The Jays are headed to Vegas. You're going to Vegas, right?
I am, of course. Why not, right?
Of course. So I think we need to look ahead at where these programs are going, but boy, we would be neglecting our duties if we didn't look back at Sunday. And is stunning a performance on both sides in this rivalry as I can ever remember. A 15-point underdog doesn't lose in college basketball very often. And especially doesn't lose when there's the track record that Creighton has against Nebraska. So we're going to get into a lot of different angles of this on both sides, but I got to ask you the most basic question in the world. What the hell happened?
Whew. It's still, it makes me cringe talking about it today. I really feel, and I have to say, I've done a few, radio hits this week, and people have asked me, similar questions, and I've had to apologize almost. I at least admit that I was wrong, because I wrote a column the day before as an advance for the game, and it was pretty dismissive of Nebraska basketball because I am inserting myself into this thing that I never experienced before. I mean, I grew up watching UNC Duke,
yep,
and then I went to college and experienced Mizzou, Kansas. So I wasn't, fully submerged in Nebraska and Creighton. So I come here, I see the record, I see that this is Creighton's greatest team ever. At least that's what they called it ahead of the season. And so I'm like, okay, why is this game still who cares about this game anymore, right? Which side even does either side care about this game? So that's kind of what I wrote about. And I was writing about whether the narrative should shift around the game and whatnot. And holy shit, they made me look dumb. Nebraska really made me look dumb. I would say it was a fun game. It wasn't the most fun to watch. It was
not fun to watch.
It was pretty nasty,
yeah.
but the result was fun. That's what college basketball is about, right?
Exactly.
So what happened was Nebraska. I mean, Max said it. Nebraska came with a game plan, a better game plan than them, and they executed it very well. I mean, that's about as much as you could hope for out of this Nebraska team. I mean, I thought the dynamic, especially toward the end of the game, between Sam Griesel and Derek Walker, those are two transcendent players for them. Derek Walker changed the entire game, and he destroyed Kalkbrenner. Kalkbrenner hasn't looked himself in all of his matches this year. It's very strange to say that there are players that have gotten the best of him in one-on-one matches this year, Umar Ballo, literally killed him. It looked like Embiid against him in Hawaii.
Now, that night I thought Kalkbrenner was sick.
Yeah, and I've heard similar things.
He wasn't sick Sunday. I mean,
right.
his complexion was better. He just
got killed by a 6'9" big, and Derek Walker's incredibly talented, but man, I don't know what's up with him, but I will say Derek Walker handed it to him. There wasn't down the stretch. There wasn't a possession where Derek Walker caught it and I didn't think, oh, he's not gonna score. It was light for him. And then Sam Griesel, the pressure he put when they started pressing and they had to put a small guard would have to pick him up, and he was just the empty side post ups you saw in the beginning of the game. They were kind of neutralized. They started working, and they not only did they start working, started causing havoc. And
okay,
it was wraps from there.
You're right about all that.
Yeah.
But Nebraska only scored 63 points.
Yeah.
Okay. Creighton lost the game because Creighton couldn't score.
Yeah.
Creighton took 43s.
Insane number, by the way.
What is going on with this offense? My criticism of Creighton's offense is that they think they're a really good shooting team, and they're actually not. But I have a feeling that from your vantage point, it's more complex than that.
And it is. Mostly because, before the Texas game, there was only one bad shooting game they had. The rest were, 40% in that range. Like the worst game we were talking about was St. Thomas. Then we get to Austin and it's like, oh shit, 15% is crazy off like 27 attempts. Like that was wild to watch like unfold, because with every shot you're thinking, is this the one that's gonna fall? And then by a certain point you're like, okay, just stop shooting. Like it's not gonna happen. And I thought with the Texas game, Texas was giving them a little more to work with, and then Creighton was getting to like a little more of the mid range here and there, getting to the rim at least. Like Nebraska, there was none of that. So like even though they still somehow shot better from three in the Nebraska game, you wouldn't believe that if you watched that game. But they did, but they didn't shoot overall from the field. They shot way worse than Texas, because all Nebraska gave them was threes. And so you're watching them pack the paint, and Creighton is shooting, and 40 attempts is like some nut shit. Like that's otherworldly. And so
what's crazy is like the first 4 minutes of the game, Creighton took like 5 threes and 6 threes, something like that. And I thought to myself, boy, they're on pace to shoot 43s, which is,
that's LeBron
crazy,
cap Dirk.
Crazy
that's
high.
LeBron cap Dirk.
And then they actually got to 40. And some of that was a little bit desperation at the end, but like I realized Nebraska was packing the paint and then scrambling and rotating, and Nebraska's got a bunch of guys who are 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", and they close out really hard and well, but it just felt like Creighton was adamant to break the ceiling off of the building with a couple threes, and they were stubbornly pursuing that big roar when they probably should have just been a little bit more disciplined in getting to the rim.
Sure. And well, the thing with them is like they generate those looks. Like even aside from Nebraska letting them have some of those, like they look to generate those looks, and they do. And you'll see, like I was talking about this with someone from the staff the other day, like you look at there's a page that tracks shot quality on Twitter.
Yep.
And they're easily like top 10 in the country in shot quality, and they like I don't think they ever lose a game in terms of shot quality, because they get the looks right. But then you've seen games where they have such a wild disparity in how many they actually knock down, and I think you've seen that the last 2 games. But Nebraska, it was crazy, because now you're really truly like the Texas game, they still found a way to be in that, because whether that was like other miscellaneous buckets or like their defense, which they didn't have on Sunday, they still found a way to be in that game. But the Nebraska game was like they were really dying. You were witnessing they were dying on that hill, and it was rough to watch, man. Like at a certain point, you're like is this team's floor? Like I thought Austin was the team's floor, and then you come out against Nebraska, and you're like, none of the starters are gonna play well. Like none of them are gonna give you a game. I mean, Farabello was the best performer, and I mean he hasn't exactly had a great year. So you're looking around, and you're like, this is what it looks like when this team
there was a really interesting
Mm-hmm.
comment from McDermott afterwards that I think was a question in my mind before the season. Okay, Kansas knows that they're wearing the target every year. Kentucky knows they're wearing the target every year. Duke knows. Okay, Gonzaga knows. Creighton doesn't usually wear the target.
Yeah,
and it's one thing to go to Maui and like go up against teams that are equal to you, or maybe even higher in stature. It's one thing to play bye games where you can play poorly and still win.
Yep.
But when you go into a game against a Power 5 opponent where you're the perceived better team, better program, and you're wearing the target, that's a little new to Creighton. And I think even with the experience that Shireman brought in, this is still a team that is not used to those expectations, I guess. I realize these guys have played a lot of basketball. I mean, Nembhard's played with some of the best players in the country, and Kalkbrenner's been around a long time, and I get all that, but it's just different when the expectations are as high as they are, and you miss your first 5 or 6 threes, and suddenly you tighten up a little bit, and it just feels like Creighton is playing a little bit tight and a little bit quick, and I realize some of those shots are going to go down, but I'm not convinced that these guys have the intangibles figured out yet.
Yeah, and you make a great point, because this is that I brought that Mac quote up a few times this week when I'm talking to people or when I'm writing. Like, that's a legitimate dynamic, I think. And they got bum rush. Like I don't think they really knew how to handle that. And I asked Mac, like, do you feel that way about the games coming up? And he was like, no, we lost 3 straight. Like now, I think they're in a place where they're like, maybe.
Now they have the edge back.
Yeah, maybe, because they're obviously not number 7 anymore, and people are viewing them as maybe not frauds, but like, hey, like maybe we should have took a step back here. And I don't think it helps that UConn looks like the best team in the country right now. So like, I think we're questioning whether the Big East really runs through Omaha at this point. But so I think those things, if they really truly do live and die by that underdog edge, like I think they're maybe in a good place right now. But you're right, it's an interesting dynamic to battle, especially when there is no singular leader on his team like Orion Hawkins. Like that's something they've already, proclaimed before the season, and it's still like an active thing they're dealing with. Not like they feel like it's an issue, like they really believe this team could get by as like a unit, like a vocal unit. But it damn sure would have helped to have a singular voice in a game like Sunday, and just during a time like this.
I have two questions that I want to get to that both I think are difficult questions to answer. So I don't think there's a right answer on this. But first of all, of the 5 starters, who are you most worried about long term? Like, I don't know if this guy's going to figure it out.
Long term, like their career or this year?
No, just like over the next 1 to 3 months. Like who do you think? Because you talked about Kaluma and trying to get back in rhythm. We've seen Shireman's shooting slump. Kalkbrenner's defense doesn't seem to be what it was. I thought Trey Alexander is sort of broken right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues. Which individual are you most concerned about sort of getting back on track?
I hate that there's, for me, a glaring answer to this, because I would be neglecting the years that the rest of them have had, because I think they all had their flashes, but the one I've been furthest off the mark with is Kaluma. That's a guy who I've been a big agenda pusher for. Like I thought he was. You saw the mock drafts coming into the season. Like the idea of Kaluma at his peak is still great, and at his best he's still an NBA player, but he hasn't been at his best, man. I thought the Texas game was really encouraging for him, and I don't know if he just played up to the competition after a week of having not played up to the competition in Maui, and then you look at the Nebraska game, and I don't think he made a shot. I think it went like 0 for 8 or 0 for 6 or something like that. And you saw like throughout the course of the game, like I talked about that shot that he passed on like in the second half. Like that was a bad look for me. Like
that was almost Ben Simmons against the Hawks.
Yeah, we're not gonna.
It wasn't like that,
yeah.
But you know what? It sort of reminded me of that. It's like, that showed a little bit of lack of confidence there.
Because it's not a shot that he hasn't taken before. Like that's a shot he would take 9 times out of 10. And when you look at it from the grand scheme of things, like you could say, oh yeah, a player isn't on today, so he's gonna overlook a shot and try to get teammates involved. But nobody was on. So like, what do you have to lose, right? So I don't know, but Kaluma. And we talked after that Texas game, and he was very encouraged. And I think what was so good about him in the Texas game was he was thinking, but he wasn't overthinking. Like you saw getting into the lane, passing, like the dump downs from Kalkbrenner were like chef's kiss. Like he was doing some great things on the ball without over asserting himself in the game. Like he just letting the game come to him. And I don't know how much of that we saw in the Nebraska game. So I want to see the Kaluma where he lets things come to him. It comes within the flow of the game. Obviously, if your shots don't fall, your shots don't fall. But I thought if anybody could have maybe changed the way that game went down in terms of dribble penetration and finding a different dynamic other than chucking threes, I thought it would have been him, frankly.
My second big question. Bigger concern long term, shooting or bench production?
You stumped me. because they're. I mean,
both of them are big concerns at this point. But which of the two is a bigger concern to you?
I think what's shown itself more is the lack of bench production, and I think long term, I'd definitely say long term bench production, only because they've had some really great shooting games. We can't call this team a bad shooting team yet. They've had a couple bad shooting games in a row. They're probably their two worst bad shooting games in a row, considering the circumstances. But I think that's a slump. I think that's a low. And especially relative to the bench production, because, like, let's say these last two games where they're shooting floor. Okay, really bad days. Could probably shoot themselves out of the tournament on any given day. Sure, it's a concern. But is it bigger than bench production in terms of concern? Like, we're looking at a team that really might have to put all of its weight on its 5 starters to go anywhere. Like, we're looking at a team that, like, if one of their starters goes down somehow, like, we're looking at a whole different team, man, because their bench is, like,
and I think the two are related, because I think when the starters have to carry as much burden as they do, both in terms of minutes and scoring production, like, you're going to see tired legs. And tired legs show up on defense, and they show up in jump shooting. And I kind of think Creighton looked tired on Sunday,
Sure.
you know? I realize maybe that's just a Maui hangover, but like I don't know if you can put this percentage of the production on 5 guys and not have it catch up to them, either in the form of injury or just weary legs, you know, in the middle of the conference season that probably manifests itself in more jump shooting problems. So they got to find, Mason Miller, they got to find somebody who can not only come in and play. Farabello hit 5 threes, you know, on Sunday, so it's sort of ironic to point this out after a game like he just had.
Yeah.
But
that's one man.
They got to get 8, you know. They got to get 8 guys in the mix that are a threat. And right now they've got 6.
Right.
5.5. So
exactly.
I don't know. I don't know how sustainable it is right now.
Yeah, and you can't exactly rush their bench along. Like Sharif is really gonna be a tough decision to watch through the year, because as far as when I talk to Mac, like, he's set on Sharif playing. Like, this is a guy who earned minutes on his last the tournament team that went far. Like, this is a guy that he really believes in and feels like has earned his keep. And so even despite the bad stretches or the lineups where you feel like it's unbearable that he's in them, like, Mac doesn't care. Like, Mac really believes in Reef and wants him to play, which might not always look the best with some of the guys he shares the floor with. And I don't know if that's probably more on him than anything else.
But he brings an intensity. He brings an identity that I think helps, right? He can sort of influence the game just by sheer, you know, ferocity on the ball that I think probably takes some pressure off the other guys and at least gives them a break defensively, even if he's not a shooting threat.
Well, see, I thought about that in the Texas game, because I thought I was watching him, you know, defend ball screens. I'm thinking, like, guys are attacking screens differently when he's on them. But at the same time, like, I don't think it outweighs the cons on the other end. Like, you're really seeing him, like, not just be less than reliable on the ball, like, be, like, a non-factor or even, like, liability sometimes, like, on offense. Like, it's been crazy to watch, because it's not something I saw. I thought he'd at least replicate his last healthy season's production, or even, I didn't personally think he'd make a leap, but I knew people were confident in him making at least a small jump from his last healthy season, and it hasn't happened. It's less than happened. It's been the complete opposite. So I don't know. With the rest of their bench, they're just young, man. Like, Fred King has to play games. He's only been playing basketball for so long, let alone college basketball. And then Mason Miller, he has his strengths, but he also, like, can't play defense right now. So it's going to take time, man. They're not exactly in a position that UConn's in, where they're freshmen and their bench is, like, loaded, and they got a guy in Klingon who's, like, possibly freshman of the year, barring any Cam Whitmore monster season. Like, so
I'm worried. I'll be honest. I was super high on him after Arkansas. I thought the way they handled the intensity of those first 2 games in Maui was super impressive. The Arizona thing didn't jar my confidence much because, again, I didn't think Kalkbrenner looked right, and it was the 3rd tough game in 3 days.
Yeah.
But the Texas thing shook me a little bit, even though it was a 5-point game. I didn't think that was a very encouraging performance. And then Sunday was a little bit of there was a little bit of an epiphany there. It's like, are these guys who we thought they were? And I just think some of these things, they need to get a handle on being the hunted instead of the hunter. I think there's a piece of that again, Creighton's just not used to in the same way that a Kentucky or a Kansas is. It's not just these guys. There's other big dogs that aren't playing well this year either. Gonzaga struggled, Carolina struggled.
Carolina struggled big time. Creighton isn't in Carolina's boat, but they're not exactly doing as hot as Gonzaga. Like, Gonzaga's bounced back here and there, and they've had a really, really tough schedule. So,
yeah, I just think I'd rather have Creighton go through this in December than go through it in February.
Sure.
But I think these issues are real, and I wouldn't want to dismiss them. The last thing I want to talk about in regard to Creighton, and this will be a good transition into Nebraska. 20 years ago, Joel, when you were about 2 years old, and Creighton was dominating this rivalry, and granted, they've dominated it pretty much ever since, but Creighton had the edge. Creighton had the chip on their shoulder. Creighton was a bunch of underdog kids from within a 500-mile radius, and Ben Walker and Ryan Sears and all the Kyle Korver and all these guys that they were under-recruited, and they got a chance to play major conference Nebraska, and they looked forward to taking it to the Huskers. And now it sort of feels like it's flipped, where Creighton looks at themselves in the same league as UConn, Villanova, Arkansas, Texas Tech, Texas, and it's like Nebraska comes to town, and it's like, Nebraska? Who cares about Nebraska, right? And it's almost like the intangible or psychological edge, Sunday anyway, flipped the other way, where for decades Creighton had sort of the intangible advantage in this rivalry, had more motivation, I think. And now, it was pretty clear that Nebraska was more fired up on Sunday. And granted, some of that is shots going down, I realize, but I'm not sure Creighton cares about Nebraska anymore. And I think Nebraska cares, at least this year, cared a lot about beating Creighton. And I thought that showed Sunday.
Yeah, and from the Creighton side, that's kind of what I try to capture in that column. Maybe I didn't, capture it completely, in all its totality. But yeah, I'd agree. Not having been here for that long, that's what it felt like, having, breathed every second of this season and what it was supposed to be in this new team dynamic, before then. That's exactly what it felt like. And I don't know, man. Creighton, they were days away from, or days off of playing the number 2 team in the country.
Exactly.
They had bigger fish to fry, frankly. So they come to that game and it's like, oh shit, we have to play today, not look ahead or behind us. You feel me? So
yeah, no, they used to highlight the Nebraska game, and this year it was like, oh, Nebraska, we got to play these guys. They suck. They're beneath us. And I felt like it took 10 minutes into the game for Creighton to kind of wake up and be like, oh, okay, they're actually going to play with us today.
Yeah, and by then it was like their problems were already on their front porch. So
yes,
they were too grown and outsized them for sure.
You talked about Derek Walker, and man, I think from a Nebraska, granted, Nebraska didn't play well against Indiana the other night. Sam Griesel wasn't playing, but Nebraska is legitimately a different team with Walker. They were pretty sad the first, that second half against St. John's and even the loss to Oklahoma, but with Walker coming back, Nebraska looks like a legitimate basketball team. I don't know if they're going to, get to 500 or be an NIT team, but they look like the team that can give teams problems by the way they play, both offensively and defensively. And I didn't really see that happening until Walker came back.
Yeah, and damn, I kind of had the feeling coming into that game, Derek Walker's back. Like, this is a guy. I wanted to say this is a guy that could maybe challenge Kalkbrenner based on the year he's had and how he's looked, and even like on his own, like he's just a good player. And then he showed that Sunday, like he exceeded what I even thought he could do. So obviously, like coming into the year, we're talking about Nebraska being like whatever, but I always thought like with their total team, and if Derek Walker looked like this, maybe like they were definitely gonna be above that bottom tier of like Northwestern and Minnesota. Like we weren't gonna be able to talk about those teams in the same light, but I don't know, maybe they're looking even better than that. I mean, he changed the whole complexion of his team in a way that I didn't predict. And then Sam Griesel, what a great addition, man. Like they really came up with him, and I think between the two of them and just the way the team looked on Sunday, like I know we've joked like maybe they saved Hoiberg's job, but it really feels like they at least bought him a year with the dynamic they
Long
posed.
way to go, Joel. Long way to go. But I agree. I think Sunday, gave the program a lot of credibility that it was lacking. And I have been maybe Hoiberg's biggest public critic. I mean, privately, I know he has a lot of critics, but I would have fired him last March. I thought it was a complete disaster through 3 years. I didn't think there was any chance that they could flip the identity and the culture of the program and make it sort of hard-nosed, rugged, defensive, and they are kind of trending in that direction. I mean, you as a Chicago guy, you watch what Hoiberg did with the Bulls. Like when he has tried to run, beautiful offense without the pieces, it's been a disaster.
It's nasty, yep.
And this year, finally, they just kind of decided, hey man, this is who we are. We're gonna be pretty ugly, but we're gonna be long. We're gonna fly around. We're gonna slow the game down. And I don't know if it'll keep working, but I think they've showed in the last week or two that there's at least enough hope there to make you think that this might be sustainable. This model might be sustainable, and it starts with with defense, with Gary and Bandamel and Griesel. But Nebraska looks like somebody to take seriously.
Yeah, and let me give, we can't go without mentioning Bandamel. Like he did a really great job on the guard, especially Nembhard. Like Nembhard has put on a masterclass this year in terms of just controlling the pace in every game he's been in, and I think he's like top 10. I saw a graphic yesterday. Like he's like top 10 in the country of scoring average among ranked teams or something like that, or high major teams, something crazy like that. Like Nembhard's had a really great year, not only as a facilitator but as a scorer when they needed him. And Bandamel just really took him out of his game. Like I was really impressed. So I'm looking at Sunday's game, and my instant thought was, this has to be the signature win of the Hoiberg era, right? Like this.
They went up to Wisconsin last year at the end of the year and won on Wisconsin's senior day. They ruined Brad Davison's 8th senior day ceremony, his eighth year in college. But that was the only other contender for the honor. I think with all the surroundings of the game and what it means to Nebraska. I mean, let's be honest, Joel. A huge reason for Nebraska's joy on Sunday was they get bragging rights for the next year, and they know
and this is the year to have those. So.
Yes, because Creighton's been talking about best team in school history and all that, and Nebraska's they're gonna own bragging rights, over this team. No matter how far they go, you're gonna hear Nebraska fans say, "Yeah, well, you couldn't beat us."
Yeah, as if it wasn't already enough to be rooting for their football team on Saturday.
Right.
So.
Yeah, the J-Sker jokes, those will keep coming. Did you get any feedback this week from Creighton fans or Nebraska fans that particularly stood out in regard to just the rivalry and how it maybe took a step up on Sunday?
I had a lot of people talking about my column. Like I got a lot of shit for that, and rightfully so, man. I shouldn't have dismissed Nebraska. I mean, my thing was like as the game was unfolding, like people were mentioning it as the game was unfolding, and I'm thinking like, excuse me for thinking shot makers would make shots. Like, how goofy of me.
I think you appropriately dismissed Nebraska based on the track record, based on recent history.
Yeah. But I ain't mad at the Nebraska fans who are like, in your face. Like, that is part of this, man. So I ain't mad at it. But I definitely I got some emails, got some mentions. I actually had like a few relatively respectful exchanges with people. So, like, I ain't mad at any of that. But yeah, it was some interesting stuff unfolding. And, like, Creighton just made me look dumb, man. Like what can you do at that point? Like, I'm not a person who defends all my takes, like, as Z is watching soccer over here. I couldn't tell you what's on the screen. But I'm not one of those people who defends every take with my life. And this is one of those. And so, like, people that were, you got to think, like, I had never witnessed this rivalry, or I hadn't been here to plant my roots here. So I don't understand the true dynamic of it. But then, as you're seeing the game unfold and you're hearing the small spurts of "Go Big Red" chants at the end of the game, you really start to feel what it's like and how much it actually means to people.
Well, don't feel bad, Joel, because I've been watching this game for 30 years now, and I was just as certain as you were that Creighton was going to win. It is interesting how their rise in college basketball, though, has changed the dynamic of the rivalry. Like I said before, when I started watching this thing in 1990, 95, up into the 2000s, Creighton took a lot of joy in playing Nebraska and beating Nebraska. Because Creighton was, Missouri Valley Conference, and nobody gave them a lot of credit or attention. Nebraska got bigger crowds. It's that part of it is completely changed. Where now Creighton is the big dog. They get the bigger crowds. They get more attention. They're on ESPN getting love from Jay Billis and Dick Vitale and everybody else. And they underestimated Nebraska on Sunday, and it will be interesting how that evolves over the course, going ahead, because I'm not saying that all these guys are going to be back next year or that Nebraska's guys are going to be back, but the fans on both sides are going to remember Sunday. They're going to remember what that felt like, and I think it will probably add intensity next year and maybe level out the expectations a little bit on both sides.
Yeah, and you got to admit, in terms of the idea of maybe Creighton overlooking them or whatever the case may be, like, if you're a player and you just came from the most illustrious mid-season tournament in college basketball,
and then playing number 2 in the country,
and then then you play a team that I don't even think they were top 100 KenPom going into the season or going into the game, you got to admit it, no matter if it's your state rival or the team that knocked you out the tournament last year or whatever, the juice is not going to be there, man. You were just psyching yourself up for the biggest of, the highest stakes, for 2 weeks nonstop to go to a game like that. It didn't have the same dynamic. So I can see how they overlooked them, but I also think Nebraska was the right team to expose their problems in terms of I don't think McDermott's clearly not doing this intentionally, but it feels like there's like a Tibbs effect here where he's gonna have to run his starters into the ground, and it's not by choice. Like, unlike Tibbs, it's not by choice, but Nebraska really exposed those problems.
It will be interesting here when they go to Vegas. What changes on Creighton's side? Will they make more of an effort to take fewer threes? Will they make more of an effort to play the 7th, 8th, and 9th guys, double-digit minutes? Like, are there going to be tangible things that you see, aside from just the starting five's performance? Will there be things that you see from a coaching standpoint, that decisions that are made to try to prevent some of the problems that we've seen over the last 10 days?
Yeah, and I know they got stuff up their sleeves, but I just don't know. Like, and Mac has had a few quotes like this already where he's like, he emphasizes that shooters have bad days and that stuff like that already enforces, not like he's not saying it himself, but they're going to keep shooting. Like, he's behind the idea of continuing to shoot because it's not like they're not getting the looks. I don't know how long it'll continue where they're getting the best looks and they're not looking them down or not knocking them down, but He's fully confident in taking them. So unless we see 5 straight games that look like Austin or look like Sunday, I don't know that we'll really see a change to their approach. Because even last year when they shot 30% or so from 3, like they were still shooting them. So
I know, Joel, and this is my problem. Is like I feel like the program's identity is let it fly. Like I was there when that whole thing started. Creighton had a few of the best 3-point shooting teams probably the last decade, and it created an identity for this program that I'm not sure that's who they are anymore. I realize they've still got guys who love to fire it, but man, you can't have a bunch of games where you're shooting 20 to 30% from the 3-point line where you do that and you don't eventually change your strategy. It's one thing if the Golden State Warriors are doing it, because they know what they've got in Curry and Thompson and Poole. It's another thing when you've got guys that have not proven to be great shooters. And I think it's going to be really interesting how Creighton tries to keep that identity and that level of confidence while maybe adapting a little bit to the personnel that is struggling right now.
Sure. And the crazy thing is the personnel they have, I think put any of these guys anywhere else, I think they have good individual shooting years. Nembhard is not a bad shooter. Shireman was a revered shooter coming into this year. Trey Alexander looked like he made that jump. I still think he is a improved shooter from last year, which by that mark would be a good shooter probably anywhere. Kaluma is probably the main one you got a question mark with, but that his projections of being a first rounder were based on people believing he would make a shooting leap. And then I don't think the summer helped him where he had to get surgery and was out. Like, not having the summer definitely has hurt him, and you see it across college basketball where, like, Derek Whitehead is a guy I was really high on from Duke, but he missed a big chunk of time, and he's had a slow start as a result. So I think people should be more patient with Kaluma, but, like, you put these guys anywhere else and give them, like, a perfect summer and all that, like, I think they're all good shooters elsewhere. I don't know what it is about them all being here together to have a game like that. But yeah, man, it's not. I don't think it's the personnel, but I do think based on their personnel, they could be finding other ways to score. I mean, Kaluma is a guy. I don't know how many guys with his size and potential handle can really check him in terms of dribble penetration and kicking out like that, because he is a talented passer. And then Nembhard, I mean, you saw what he did in the Arkansas game. He got it done many ways. I don't think there's a better in-between player than Trey Alexander. And then Shireman, he is mostly a shooter, but he does allow for some dribble penetration and kicking out. He's probably the best at that. So I don't think it's their personnel necessarily, but they are together having bad performances. I don't know how to describe the phenomenon.
Yeah. They gotta keep learning to play together. It's part of being a really talented team. Last thought: Huskers play Purdue tomorrow. Purdue is arguably the number 1 team in the country. I know the rankings don't say so, but they've been super impressive. Zach Edey's obviously gets all the headlines. Nebraska's going to have to play really, really well. They're in the middle of a just torturous stretch of tough games here. What do the Huskers have to do to keep it going?
I'm not sure they could do much with Purdue. Purdue's been pleasantly surprising, and the thing about Purdue is they got probably one of the best first options in college basketball, maybe even the best right now. Zach Edey looks like Olajuwon at this point or some shit. Like, you really, like, when I was in Indy covering a few of their games, like, the most frustrating thing about him to me was, like, Travion was a better big to me at the time, because Zach Edey, you knew, like, his height was inevitable, but he still didn't have the same scoring gravity, I thought, that he has this year. Like, this year it's, like, automatic, like, over the shoulder, like, there's nothing you could do. Two, three bodies, like, there's nothing you could do. And so now it's like you have a real one of the best first options in the country, and it's hell every night. Like, he's really like a first-team All-American to me.
And they've surrounded him with guys who complement him. I mean, they always do.
And they're not the most talented, but they fit well. I mean, maybe they're not the most talented right now, but I think down the line they project to be good. And like the freshman guard Braden Smith has been really surprising. Lawyer's been good. Like, the team, I didn't think this would be the team. I thought this would maybe be a much down year from last year, because last year was like their most talented team in a while, but they look really good, man.
I think Nebraska's going to play really hard. I think they've, if Griesel can be back somewhere close to where he was last weekend, I think it gives them a chance. They're going to try to muck it up. They're going to try to, create havoc out there. If they can get the home crowd into it and get the game into the last 10 minutes, I think Nebraska's got a chance. But big picture, I think it's important for the Huskers to just take a step forward of confidence, even if they lose the game. I mean, they're literally the toughest two games in their Big Ten schedule are probably the first and second ones they play. So they after a rough 10 minutes the other night, they pulled it together and played better. I thought that was encouraging. If they can get through Saturday, and play a solid basketball game, even if they lose, I think the Huskers, can look at the rest of the Big Ten and say there's nobody that we can't beat. So let's keep watching them. It's their season has gained a lot of interest over the last 10 to 14 days. So and we'll be watching Creighton in Vegas, and hopefully you can, behave yourself and not go out, spend too much time out on the town.
Hey, I already went on 1620 and told them, like, hey, if you're a reader, if you want to talk shit to me or you really like my writing, come drink with me, man. I'm going to be out drinking, so come drink with me.
The city that never sleeps, that's New York, but Joel might not be sleeping in Vegas. So
probably not. I don't sleep anyway, but definitely not there.
That'll be it for this week's episode of the Half Court Podcast. Half Court Press, we appreciate you guys listening, and we'll be back here middle of next week to discuss the recent developments with Creighton and Nebraska and college basketball in general. Thanks so much for listening.